Ed Bernstein Show. Now, here's Ed.
Hi, well, if you've been living under a rock, you may not know that we have a new sheriff in town. How many times have you heard that, Sheriff Kevin McMahill?
Oh, quite a few times, yeah. It's always fun to hear, though. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, you were under sheriff for a number of years, and as under sheriff, they call you sheriff anyway, right?
They sure do, yeah.
Yeah.
I did that for 6.5 years for Sheriff Lombardo, yes.
Yeah. And speaking about Sheriff Lombardo, I mean, how does that work? Now, he's being governor, you now being the sheriff. So how does that work, that relationship? I mean, is there, you ever find yourself having any tension now with your old boss?
Yeah, I would say once in a while. You know, Joe and I we worked through some of the most difficult things in this community that we've ever faced, obviously. And so we went through a lot of difficulty already, and we know how to communicate with one another. And, you know, there's an old joke here in Southern Nevada about who's more powerful in the state, the governor or the sheriff. And so I told Joe, I said, I guess we're going to finally figure that out. You know, so we had a little bit of fun with it. But he's doing a great job up there, and he's pretty much letting me handle the job I got elected to. So I'm grateful for that.
So because he had your job, is he more, you know, empathetic, you think, to what you have to do?
Well, listen,
or critical. He can go either way.
Either way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he knows, and you know, we're not the same person, and so I structured the agency a little bit differently than he had it, and but he's been very, very gracious and available to me anytime I need to talk to him about any of the challenges that I'm facing. So I'm grateful for that.
What's been like a big surprise for you coming onto office?
So as you know, I was gone for 2 years and campaigning for most of that. When I came back, I think the biggest thing that shocked me was the amount of violence that was going on in the city. I had 11 homicides in my first 11 days, and as you can imagine, you know, I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, what's going on here? And I certainly don't want to become like Chicago or some of these other places where that many shootings is just routine. And so, but really looking at the factors that were driving the violence, we're also seeing a really significant uptick in juvenile violence and gun-related crimes that are happening. And then I would say the other thing that really surprised me, Ed, was that you know, we arrest these individuals for felony crimes, and they go to jail, and they're literally right back out the next day. And while I'm, as you well know, I'm a big believer that incarceration doesn't fix everything, certainly mental health, addiction, and homelessness. But when you have a violent individual that's committing a violent felony against and causing somebody to become a victim, they need to be incarcerated and held there. And it's just we've got a pervasive idea that people need to be let out of jail right after they committed a violent felony, and it's just not working out very well.
So here's an area perhaps that you know, your background and relationship with the governor maybe, you know, can help, you know, two of you working together to try to resolve some of these issues.
Yeah, you know, I'll give you another example of that. I mean, he's got this crime bill that he's introduced up there, and, you know, obviously he's sort of swimming against the current there with the Democratic legislator and legislative unit. And how far that bill gets, I'm not quite sure. But as one example in that, raising the felony threshold for theft to $1,250 2 years ago has caused retail theft to literally just go crazy. And so I recently, while I was on the campaign trail, I learned from the Retail Theft Association that our theft here in Southern Nevada is actually higher than it was in San Francisco when they started closing a lot of their stores. And so I've instituted a retail theft squad as well as a construction theft squad to try to address some of the challenges that we have in there. But property crimes are just not looked at in the same way in the criminal justice system as violent crime. And I've already explained to you how lenient we've become when it comes to violent crime. So you can imagine what it looks like when we catch somebody who's burglarizing a place or stealing from a store. And, you know, there's so many stories I could tell you about going in and shoplifting that ultimately end up in somebody getting shot or one of my police officers getting shot at. It just continually happens. And stores have adopted this policy of non-confrontation because they don't want their people to get hurt.
And you can't be everywhere doing everything with these type of offenses. We just don't have enough police. And What's going on in our community with the number of police? I know you hear on the news how policemen are retiring, how nobody wants, because of political issues and other concerns around the country, that we have less people becoming police officers.
That's all true.
Yeah.
When I took over, we had about 300 budgeted unfilled positions. I'm happy to tell you that so far we've already cut that in half. And part of the reason we were able to cut that in half was A, I hired some larger academies, but B, our retirement slowed down significantly. So we saw about a 30% decrease in the amount of people that were leaving to retire. How long that lasts, I'm not quite sure, but I've got another 150 positions to fill, and candidly, that's really not even the biggest emergent problem that I have. Is my dispatch center is only about 50% filled right now, and so I broke that up so that not everybody has to be a dispatcher. You can actually be a call taker, so we're hiring anybody that wants to come along for that.
And what is the difference in those two jobs?
So you can take a 911 call or a 311 call and then route it to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher is the one that will tell the cops where to go and what to do. So it's much more technical to be a dispatcher than it is to be a call taker, although we train both of them very, very, very well. And to the public, look, I have almost a 1 hour wait for 311 services, and that's not acceptable to me. So I have an academy going in, hopefully here in the next, next week, that I'm anticipating hiring at least 50 more call takers. So the background processes, we have to work on that to shorten the amount of time it takes somebody to get hired without lowering our standards. So we're working on it.
You always hear, like, regarding teachers, that they have to go out of state to try to recruit and bring teachers into Nevada. The same is true, I would suspect, with officers.
That's a great question. I'll tell you what, in looking at the recruitment process, I looked at when you had a lot of the issues after George Floyd in Portland and Seattle, San Francisco, and we, like everybody else, sent recruiters to those cities. But police really don't leave the city that they're working in because they're tied into the retirement system. So if you have 10 years, that means you have at least 10 or 15 years left in that retirement system, and you can't transfer from state to state. So we really haven't been very successful in recruiting from other states individuals to come here. What we're working on is really finding ways to build pipelines into our communities. It's because what happens a lot of times is this 18-year-old kid graduates high school and then they smoke a little weed or they do something that usually disqualifies them from getting hired as a police officer. So educating them about that, letting them understand our retirement system, I think, is a huge part of that, because while we're not going to ever become millionaires as cops, you do have a very healthy retirement. And so really trying to find people in each one of those communities that were underrepresented in the police department, so African American, Asian, Hispanic, and most importantly, female. We're not even close to 50-50 on the female population. So we have strategies in place for each one of those, and we're continuing to work on that.
Diversity, those kind of issues are something that were very, very close to your heart as an officer. Now, as sheriff, you're in a position to, I guess, oversee that, and this has been a critical, issue for you.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes us better. My wife was on the police department. She retired as a deputy chief, and we worked together as young cops. And I'll tell you, she just brought a different perspective to it than I had. My mindset in early 1990 was, you arrest them all, and that was the way it worked. But we focus in on how do we really try to find alternatives to incarceration so that those low-level offenders, we talked just a minute ago about the mental health, addiction, and homelessness. We also know that incarceration doesn't fix mental health, addiction, or homelessness. So working with city and county and state to try to find alternatives for that. As you know, we're not far from the corridor of hope here on Main Street and the Boulevard, and just doing a cleanup over there today again and trying to get those individuals connected to wraparound resources, which has to be part of the solution.
Right. Of course, anybody who's married with children knows how their wife brings a different perspective to
Yes, sir.
and ideas to anything. We have so much going on in Las Vegas. It's just amazing, even post-COVID. I mean, from prior to COVID compared to where we are now with football, hockey. Today, story in the paper about baseball stadium coming to Tropicana. The MSG, Madison Square Garden Dome, is going to bring lots of attractions. The F1, Formula One races are going to bring an entirely new experience to Las Vegas. And the idea of going down the Strip, and I was reading a paper recently about even having, pedestrians, like walking, following the race, are able to walk and follow the race. I mean, all of this puts additional pressure on the police department. I know, like when I go to a hockey game, you see Metro officers there in the game, directing traffic. That takes all, more resources, more manpower. How do we have enough security and police to handle all the new great, wonderful things we have coming to town, but with those great things are going to become problems as well?
So when you talk about the F1, the anticipated economic impact of that to our city is $1.3 billion. By comparison, a short 2 months after that, we're going to have the Super Bowl, and that's $238 million. So scope and magnitude of F1 is very concerning to me. My folks have been working on that for quite a while with the F1 people, and as well as the county and fire and all of the other people. The truth is, I don't have enough officers to do that, and so we're looking at that. We will do exactly what it is that we do all of the time. We will rely on resources that come from North Las Vegas and Henderson and Mesquite and Boulder City. Even Nye County is out coming up and filling up our special events overtime for all of those things. What I won't let happen is any of those events to be unsafe. And so we'll continue to have those conversations, and if we don't have enough, we'll continue to look for other outside resources to help us. There's private security that can help. F1's I don't think Americans know the F1 as well as they do things like the Super Bowl. So, the other piece of that is we also have to plan that. We're in it for a whole decade with F1. They're going to be back year over year over year.
So when you talk about the planning, how does that work? Let's take traffic or safety as two issues. Who coordinates that? Is it the county, the state? Is it convention authority?
All of the above. I would equate it to the same type of planning that we do for our New Year's Eve event. Every single entity involved attends a meeting that we generally have at Metro headquarters, and we start to see the shape of first off, we had to see what the shape of the track was going to be, and then we had challenges as far as access and egress for emergency vehicles, and you had to change the track the way it was going to go. It's a really complex coordination that occurs, but the people that are involved in that, led by our organization, have been doing it for years for New Year's Eve, and so we also test it, right? We do tabletop exercises, and inject some real difficult challenges. Maybe a bomb is located, or maybe there's an active shooter, and so we're very well prepared for it, and we will be very well prepared for it. But yes, this town is growing in a way that is, the location of the baseball stadium is going to be another real challenge for us, especially when we have those intersecting sports events that go on at the same time as maybe a fight and a concert and all of those kinds of things. Not to mention, we also have Tropicana that's happening at the same time that's complicating the traffic issues down in that area.
Yeah, so you have three huge stadiums. There's likelihood that events will be going at the same time in all three of them there.
Yes,
the stadium, the arena, and the new baseball thing. But it may take a few years to build the baseball stadium, so it'll give you some time to try to figure this out, right? Yeah. Recently had a couple shootings in and around schools. And when we mentioned shootings, and you mentioned, you said you don't want Las Vegas to become like Chicago, but it's not only the big cities. It's small towns all over America are suffering with this malaise. Do you have any thoughts on why it's happening, or any ideas on any potential solutions?
I get asked about this, and I don't shy away from this. A lot of people want to talk about gun control. And, I always respond by saying, I don't really need another gun law. I just need the current gun laws to be enforced, and those people that we're arresting for them to actually be prosecuted and incarcerated. Because we do it all the time, but it consistently these violent individuals keep getting out of jail and they keep committing the same crimes. I had a shooting yesterday where 2 kids were shot. I believe they were 8 and 10. That was immediately following a shooting that occurred at Von Tobel Middle School, where a school security officer got shot. That one occurred because somebody was off campus, got involved in a road rage, and shots were fired, and an unlucky bullet hit that individual. And the 2 kids weren't the target of the shooting, but another gang member. So we've identified that gang member, but no surprise, Ed, the kid just recently got arrested for a gun charge and was released. And he's not under 18, he's over 18. He was immediately released from jail, and he's out there in our community again involved in gun violence. And so it's a breakdown of the family, it's a breakdown of responsibility, it's a breakdown of us actually securing the weapons that we have in our home. I'm personally in favor of the fact that if you ever buy a weapon, you have to buy a safe that weapon will fit in, right? So safe storage of firearms at our homes would go a long way. I also believe in helping that keep the guns out of the hands of the kids, but also keep the guns out of the hands of burglars when they come in and break into your home to steal whatever you have. If the guns are unsecured, those are the kinds of guns that we're seeing out there on the street today.
Right. So controlling the guns that are out there and protecting, securing those guns. On a lighter note, because I know this is weighty stuff, recently learned that you were a guest on a TV show, right? Cake Boss?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a clip of that or a photograph or something? I think we do.
Listen, I got to tell you, I'm so happy to be here, and I really appreciate everything that you and all your officers do. Really appreciate you. So I want to thank you. And but with that being said, I'm not going to take it easy on you.
I didn't think you would, but I've been watching it on TV. I've been watching.
You've been watching it.
I studied what Duff did a little bit.
All right. I don't want to stay there as a new sheriff in town. All right, so you ready to take me on or what?
Let's get it done.
Oh, you got an apron there?
I do. I came ready.
I like that. No. We got it. All right, so we have some base-sized cakes here. I'll just kind of show you what to do, and then you follow me. You follow my lead.
So I went and I took a glass blowing class so I could work on my,
Your skills.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to apply to here, but it is all about
ice and ball.
Yeah, we can get some ice and ball. He wants to blow some glass. I love it. Well, look, for me, no matter what the cake looks like, it's going to taste good.
Right.
So that we know. All right, and let's do a little border. Okay, so we're going to kind of like squeeze and pull like a little shell. So you're going to squeeze. Oh, you got it. All right.
You know, the type A personality, we don't like to lose,
I
right?
get it, Sheriff. All right, so now we're going to pick this up.
All right.
Okay, you're lefty or righty?
I'm right-hander.
Okay, so pick this up.
So was the apron part there at Metro headquarters, or did Cake Boss give it to you?
No, I brought it. I just wanted to have a little fun with him. And we
Okay.
ended up giving a wooden badge that we have, and he hung it in his office. But I say, he's a really great guy, and he offered that the next time he was coming into town, he was going to do a cooking class with a bunch of our disadvantaged youth. And so he really wants to get more involved in the community when he's here, and it's just a great thing.
Great. And he has restaurants here. I know.
Yeah,
One of my kids worked at one of his restaurants
really?
at the Venetian.
Yeah. Well, that's where we did. We did
Yeah.
it right across from the restaurant there.
Right. Yeah. Now, having watched that, and then I know you're very big on this wellness program for your officers, right?
Yeah.
Cake, wellness, okay. A little bit of cake's okay.
Yeah.
But what is the wellness program that you're trying to develop? And it's not only, we're not talking physical, we're also talking mental, emotional, right?
Yeah, so really the wellness program is designed to take care of the heart, mind, body, and soul of our police officers.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to tell you, the most interesting thing that came out of me beginning to talk about that was that every fire department wanted to be involved, every EMS group wanted to be involved. And I as we started this conversation with other elected officials about how do we do this, because the one thing I can tell you about first responders and cops in particular, if you screw this up, they're not going to want to get mental health treatment, right? They have to trust us. And so I'm taking it fairly slowly and trying to build something, because simply an employee assistance program rebranded as wellness. It's really focused in on how do we go in and get maybe some unconventional therapies for our officers. You know, I've talked to you about this before, but you know, the officers that responded to 1 October, they're never going to forget that, and they're never going to be the same from it. But we also have crime scene analysts and dispatchers and all of those folks that have different types of trauma based on that. And so we have a responsibility to them to do that. And I said this before, and I'll say it again, is if we take care of those first responders in a way that we've never taken care of them, they're going to go out and take care of this community in a way they've never taken care of it. And I really believe that. I know that. I suffer from some trauma myself, having been there on many different single instances, but the cumulative effect of trauma is very detrimental to our police officers and our firefighters, and we've got to do something for them. And everybody seems to be on board, but I'm also making sure to be very methodical about how it is that we do this so that we're successful in it.
Right, baby steps. Sometimes are much get you there much quicker than making a mistake and trying to do too much at one time, but especially in this area. Because it seems like in today's world, there's a lot of companies, a lot of businesses are working with coaching and therapy for employees, and insurance companies are even offering some free therapy, right?
Right.
Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, some of that, absolutely, but also introducing things like yoga, meditation, EMDR therapy. EMDR is one of those. It's eye movement, and it's proven to be extremely successful for returning Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans. And so there for a while we had nobody here in town that would do it, and now we have a few practitioners, and we're working in the right direction. But it's expensive, and we've got to find ways to make it more available to our officers, and I'm just working through all the nuances.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes even breathing right can
absolutely
can pause and cause a different reaction in somebody.
100%. Well, we don't teach that. Right, but when you learn it, then you can actually employ that.
I just downloaded an app on my phone, a breathing app, and there are different for waking up, for being calm, for going to sleep. I mean, different breathing techniques for different resources that you need. You talked about property crimes. Cars. I've been, reading of people stealing these Kias, and you can just remotely start them and take off with somebody's car. I mean, has that been an issue for us here?
Absolutely. It's in fact, auto theft is the single crime that I'm up in as compared to the same time last year, and I'm up by 30%. And it's directly attributed to the Kia Hyundai challenge that you see on TikTok with these kids that can use the cords to go in and steal the cars. And so really, the only resolution to that is the manufacturers change what it is what's going on. We've been working with both manufacturers. They send out the club, but people don't put the club on and those kind of things. But they've got to change what happens at the manufacturing process, so you can't make it so simple to steal a car.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're doing that.
Yeah, it just takes time.
Yeah. What other property crimes are you working on? You talked about the retail theft. I mean, it's you heard about these gangs going into L.A. and just barging into jewelry stores and clearing the shelves.
We have there's a lot of retail theft going on where they just walk in and steal just under $1,250, and then the most my officers can do right now under the law is give these folks a ticket. It's just emboldened the criminal, and it's just not good. The construction theft is the other one I mentioned, and it is really rampant.
You're talking about materials.
Right. So, you go out to, or they'll go out and, they're building houses and just completely destroy what they've already put up, the sheetrock and all of those kind of things. So what's really fascinating about this, though, is that this is an area where technology can be used very effectively. We can put trackers on things that are getting stolen. Our individual companies can actually paint their stuff a particular color, so we know if you see a purple drill, that belongs to X company, or if you see a green one. A lot of things we did years ago before the recession hit that caused us to have to eliminate both of those units. We're putting them back together, and we're hoping to see some pretty significant success right away.
Yeah, the technology is a two-way sword, right? I mean, it's great to use it for law enforcement, but by the same time, you have it, you get brighter thieves.
You absolutely do. Yeah.
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 Tough stuff. So what are you looking forward to doing now? You've been on the job, what, 6 months?
Yeah.
You know, what are you looking forward to doing, completing? What's your goal for your first term?
So as I mentioned to you before, one of the big pieces of what I'm trying to change at Metro is the philosophy of community policing. And when I say that, you know, my core fundamental philosophy is to inject humanity into all that we do. And people always ask me, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, you know, if you look at what happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, if one officer would have injected humanity into that situation, we wouldn't have had George Floyd's murder and then ultimately rioting, and that led to Shea McMahill being shot and paralyzed here in Las Vegas for the improper actions of a police officer or a group of police officers in Minneapolis. You saw the same thing in Memphis, where a bunch of officers were beating a man to death. One cop, a little bit of humanity would have stopped that.
Is that a screening issue? Or?
I think it's a culture issue. I don't think that a single one of those guys. I don't know all of their stories. Maybe they have a different hiring process. I think what happens, because if you watch that video, there's no doubt in my mind that's not the first time they've done that. Right. No way, not a chance.
So
they're doing it right under a mobile crime camera. Right. So there's a culture that was developed in that specialized unit called Scorpion out there that allowed for them to do what it is that they did. So constant evaluation, constant inspecting what you expect, and leadership is critical to make sure that these things don't happen.
Thank you so much, Sheriff, for your time. There's a new sheriff in town, and he's going to make these good changes.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
My name is George Tice, and I'm a real client of Ed Bernstein. So I was in a really bad car accident, head-on collision. I had to have surgery, and I needed a good attorney. So I immediately thought of Ed. Ed is tenacious, and he knows what he's doing, so he was my best choice. He cares about his clients, and he cares about the results of the case.
The most important decision you can make when hiring a lawyer is choosing the right lawyer for your case. We are that firm.